In smaller healthcare premises like day centers, medical centers, polyclinics and doctors' surgeries, evacuation may be relatively straightforward. These sorts of establishments will usually use a single continuous alarm, and evacuation will be to a safe area away from the building. Assistance or additional provision may be necessary for non-ambulatory patients, patients on support, vulnerable and bariatric patients. Such assistance should be prioritized. Clinical staff should undertake a leading role in evacuating patients with non-clinical staff, assisting them where possible to ensure patients and visitors are moved calmly to a place of safety. Many larger healthcare facilities may also have non-clinical buildings, for example research or training departments, in which a continuous alarm will sound, and a direct evacuation away from the building to an assembly area must be made. But for the vast majority of large healthcare establishments, the concept of progressive horizontal evacuation from fire compartment to fire compartment is vital in maintaining patient care while safeguarding life from fire. Remember, fire compartments are areas within a building which have a fire-resistant construction, usually with features such as fire-resistant doors, and fire or smoke dampers within service ducts, which close automatically when a fire is detected. Fire compartments usually provide 60 minutes of fire protection and may include 30-minute sub-compartments to further divide the area. Similarly, fire hazard rooms, such as kitchens or storerooms, will also be designed to contain a fire for up to 30 minutes. It is important to understand that fire compartments only provide these levels of protection if they are sealed. Any breach, such as open doors, unsealed holes, or openings for services to pass through, will allow fire to spread into the next compartment. You may also remember from an earlier module that most buildings operating progressive horizontal evacuation will also use a two-stage fire alarm system, a continuous alarm for areas in which the fire is located, and intermittent alarms in adjoining compartments. If an incident escalates, adjoining areas will change to a continuous alarm and neighboring compartments will sound an intermittent alarm. So what does this mean if you work in a non-clinical area of a building that operates a progressive horizontal evacuation system? Depending upon their location, non-clinical staff who hear a continuous fire alarm should immediately make their way to the nearest fire compartment in which they hear an intermittent alarm or no alarm at all. Remember, if possible, all doors and windows should be shut, and usually fire wardens or other designated people will check that rooms are clear, including toilets and storerooms. Non-clinical staff who are in intermittent fire alarm areas should check the nearest alarm repeater panel to establish the location of the fire. Once the fire location has been established, non-clinical staff not aiding in evacuation should continue working as normal. If the incident escalates, the area may go into continuous alarm, and staff should progressively move away from the fire source into intermittent fire alarm areas, or areas with no fire alarm sounding at all. This might include moving down the building. In a serious fire situation, this vertical evacuation may be required to provide more room on upper floors for restricted mobility patients and fire service personnel. Assembly points where people assemble at a safe location outside of the building will also be part of the local fire plan. Evacuation from clinical areas poses a whole host of problems relating to the continuity of care and welfare of the patients. Many patients may be in a critical condition while others may be reliant on medication and equipment that needs to either accompany them or be available at any new location. If a continuous alarm is sounding and staff have assessed the cause of the fire, the senior member of the clinical team will decide if an evacuation is necessary. Partial evacuations may be an acceptable course of action, for example moving people away from a small fire or from the smell of burning, while leaving those patients not in immediate danger but whose care could significantly deteriorate if they were moved. An example of this might be to evacuate only a side bay if there is smell of burning within that bay alone, or to contain a fire in one room. Generally, clinical teams will organize the direct movement of patients with non-clinical staff assisting when possible. For example, moving visitors, ambulant patients, those in wheelchairs, equipment, and essential records. During any fire evacuation, beds, wheelchairs, and the like should be fully utilized to improve evacuation flow. To ensure oxygen-dependent patients are not put at risk, oxygen supplies should only be isolated on the authorization of the senior member of the clinical team. Remember, the general fire evacuation principle is moving people from the immediate area of danger through the nearest fire-resistant doors into the next fire compartment. Once behind the nearest fire door, staff will then continue to evacuate people beyond the next set of doors. This progressive evacuation will then continue until a time when staff, visitors, and patients end up in an intermittent fire alarm area, an area with no fire alarm sounding at all, or an area identified for continuity of care. Once they have identified the location of the fire, clinical staff in adjacent areas should prepare themselves for the arrival of evacuated patients. Staff should assess, based on their own patient needs, whether or not they can release people to assist with the evacuation. As most healthcare premises operate at full capacity, an evacuation will mean corridors, general circulation routes, and adjacent wards will become heavily occupied with those being evacuated. It is important that areas do not become so obstructed that they prevent ongoing evacuation or restrict access for fire service personnel tackling the fire. Vertical evacuation may become necessary due to fire spread, congestion, or ongoing patient care. This may require the use of ski sheets, ski pads, or similar evacuation aids to move patients to lower levels of the building, or to refuges closer to the building's final exits. Staff must be fully conversant with their use. Ski pads, ski sheets, and other evacuation aids are designed to be used where staircase evacuation could be a real possibility. Some departments where staircases could be used as a primary means of escape may have them ready for immediate use. Other healthcare facilities may have them strategically placed in predetermined locations for use if progressive horizontal evacuation proves insufficient during a major incident. It must be remembered that the evacuation of the premises is the responsibility of the healthcare organization and not the fire service. Consideration must be given to the evacuation of all types of patients. For example, there will be particular requirements for moving bariatric patients. In serious cases of fire spread, complete evacuation of a building may be required, and the major incident plan or shelter and evacuation policy should be implemented. This will give guidance on where to locate patients, visitors, staff, and equipment for safety and ongoing medical care. Patients may have to be moved to different healthcare establishments for continued treatment, or they may have to be discharged until alternative beds can be found for them. Recording patient whereabouts is a vital part of any full evacuation. Existing and arriving visitors will need to be directed to an area where they can obtain information or collect patients. Staff will need to ensure that vulnerable patients are protected and that any media presence is controlled. If the clinical team decide that the risk of moving a patient is greater than the fire risk, a decision may be taken for the patient to remain in a fire compartment. This is known as defend in place. Staff involved in a defend-in-place scenario should always raise the alarm and ensure others know exactly where they are and the number of people involved. They should prepare the patient to move as best they can and must evacuate immediately if there is any doubt about their safety. Trained staff may also attempt to fight the fire to negate the need to move a critically ill patient. This is a decision that needs to be constantly revisited as circumstances change. Remember, rooms usually provide either 30 or 60 minutes of fire protection. Decisions to defend in place may be taken due to risk from smoke, patient stability, access to vital equipment, or an operation that is at a critical stage. Once this decision has been made, however, steps must be taken to ensure the safety of the patient and any clinical team members providing ongoing treatment. It is essential that everything possible is done to safeguard people in this situation, including informing the fire service of their exact location so that they can provide as much protection as possible, ensuring that all fire doors and windows remain shut to restrict the spread of smoke and fire as much as possible. Any breach could seriously compromise safety by reducing the time that the compartment will provide protection. Maintaining communications until the fire service have extinguished the fire and smoke has been ventilated from the area.